Yo, welcome to the Cosmic Paradox channel. Like, subscribe, and share. What's going on out there, lovely ladies and gentlemen, guys and goddesses, girls and guys, however you prefer to be identified? Welcome, welcome, welcome. So I wanted to do this video mostly because I put up this post a couple of days ago, and it was a brother Bobby Hemmett, and he was basically talking about the concept of Satan get behind me and the connection that it has to the Horus and Set exchange or interaction or polarities of energy.
Who's the original Christ? We are. Yeah, I'm saying, no, I'm saying, but even in the mythological aspect, who is the original Christ that precedes the Christian representation of Christ? Heru Horus. Jesus, in this case, which is hard, said, Satan, get behind me. Satan, get behind me. Satan, get behind me. The base of the skull, the base of the spine and the top of the skull, no, the base of the skull and the top of the spine is the most concentrated part of melanin, the medulla oblongata, the mouth of God. Satan, get behind me is melanin, soot on. Soot, which means the triple blackness of space, or the most ancient God ever to exist.
And one of the ways that I know to drive this point home is with the movie Malignant. Now, the movie Malignant came out last year in 2021. Now, it is a horror film. And aside from it being just a horror film, it has a lot of gore and, it's a pretty twisted film. It also does have some pretty strong Gnostic and occultic underlying messages. And before I go even further into that, I'm going to come a little bit further here, and I'm going to show you guys where we are going to be looking to drive this whole message home. So we're going to be looking at Matthew 16. Matthew chapter 16 verses 21 through 26. That is when we see in the scripture, Satan get behind me. And it's only right that we go to the source of the Bible and see the context in which it is used and see the concept in this movie, and also as well as, as far as how Bobby Hemmett broke down that particular image and how that correlates to Satan get behind me. So let's take a look at Matthew chapter 16 verses 21 through 26. Now, I took the liberty of posting it here for you so you can see it. Alright, and feel free to look it up in your own time as well. Now, this particular section of the Bible, this particular chapter of Matthew, is when when he predicts his death, when he's talking to his disciples, and he's letting them know, look, I gotta go up to Jerusalem. Okay, I'm gonna suffer a little bit, and I'm gonna die, but I'm gonna rise again. But I'm letting y'all know what's what. And one of his disciples stepped forward, and he didn't like how he was talking. Let's read it. Alright, so from that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Never, Lord, he said, this shall never happen to you. Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it." What good will be for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? So what is Jesus talking about in this scripture? Because we have to remember that the Bible is filled with many parables and allegory. So they aren't to be taken literal, but more so to be studied more metaphysically, to get the underlying spiritual message for the individual. Now, when we now seeing this now, so what is it that he's talking about? Okay, so he's telling them, look, I have to go through this so that I can be spiritually reborn, so I can have my rebirth, so I can ascend and be with my Father. And then Peter comes and tells him, look, that's not going to happen to you. It'll never happen. First of all, we all have to die, right? And the mere fear and that particular type of response to death is one of ego. Because we are talking about the unknown. We don't know what will happen. And the ego itself only exists in this physical. There is nothing beyond the physical for the ego. So to speak in that manner, you're not speaking of God. You're speaking like man. You're speaking of human affairs. You're speaking of human matters. That's not what we doing here. If you gonna follow me, meaning if you gonna rise up, then you gotta take up your cross. It's a metaphysical, it's an alchemy reference. It's referring to an alchemical process. Because whosoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whosoever loses their life for me will find it. So when you truly understand spirituality, you willing to die for what you believe in. It's very simple and plain. You will die for it because that's what you believe. That's what you know to be true. But when you don't, when you operate from ego, from that fear standpoint, you're going to do whatever you got to do to prolong the inevitable. So that's what we talking about when we looking at this right here, when we looking at it in this way. When we say, well, what is he talking about? Why I say, Satan, get behind me. Now let's go into it a little bit further. So we already saw the video, and in it we hear Bobby Hemmett when he talks about this particular image, right? So like he says in that video, the very first, or the original representation of Christ, or the Christ energy that predates Jesus, would be Horus or Heru, however you prefer to call that entity or that energy. But it's the Christ energy, because let's remember, Christ is a title. Okay, it means the Messiah. It means chosen one, awakened one, the Messiah. So Christ itself is a title. Right? So when he talks about Satan, get behind me, it being the base of the skull, the representation of where the crucifix itself occurs. Right? So when I say that's where the crucifix occurs, or that's your the base. And when he says the old God, what is it that he's referring to? Well, see, if you look at it here, it even says it here on this picture. It says the dual God, Horus Set, or the black God and the white God. So we're talking about the oldest expression of energy. And when I say the crucifix, and what we're talking about with Jesus here, so what happened is, if you not understand the story of Jesus, so Jesus was supposedly crucified at the age of 33. Now that 33 is said to be symbolic to represent your actual spine, because you have 33 bones that go from the base of your skull all the way down to the base of your tailbone, your coccyx. So all of these vertebrae is 33 total. So these down here, this is 5 that's fused together. So that's how you get 33. So you get 33 bones. Now this is seen as, this is the symbolism that so many people are familiar with when you get to discussing Freemasonry, right? You know, so what is referring to is your Kundalini energy. See, it's referring to your own ascension, you being empowered with your own inner goddess energy that's within you, known as the Kundalini energy. So as you can see here, you know, it's symbolized. See, it also looks very similar to a snake. Okay, so that's why you have the snake symbolism the way that you do, and your chakra system. So it's pretty much your Jacob's ladder. Okay, this is how you get to heaven. This is your stairway to heaven. So it's basically referring to your Kundalini. It's referring to your chakra system. So this system within you, rising this system up, is referring to the crucifixion. So that that energy is reborn again. So, but what happens is, so once this energy rises up, right, and it gets to the base of the skull, which is why you have the skull, which another name for skull is Calvarium. So that's why Jesus was crucified on Mount Calvary, because it's all symbolic. It's referring to the energy that's going up. Okay, so this is referring to the base of the spine. Now, he was talking to the 12 disciples. Now, the 12 disciples are your 12 cranial nerves. So, and as we see here, and there's so much symbolism when you look. That's why this is what this represents. Okay, so all of this is pretty much representation of your own body. So it's talking about your spiritual body within your actual physical body. So when you look at the 12 cranial nerves, these nerves are responsible for pretty much all of the major functions in your body, all of your senses and everything that's major. You know, your lungs, breathing, your heart beating, everything goes back to those 12 cranial nerves. So when you understand that, and you now looking at these symbols, you understand that it's spinal column symbolism. It's referencing the Kundalini, it's referencing the chakras. So that's what your snakes represent. You know, that's what they all represent. Now, I know we have this, a lot of people have this misconception that all of this is, you know, evil, satanic, but that's all propaganda, and that's because it is not in it's not in the best interest of the system for you to understand these ancient spiritual systems, because these ancient spiritual systems will empower you, and you will no longer see a need for these systems that you turn your power over to today. You wouldn't need them, so they would lose all its power. So of course, it's in the best interest of the system for you to regard all of this information as something that's bad, negative, or evil. That outright evil. I mean, who wants to choose to be evil? Who wants to choose, to side with the bad side, right? So you create this propaganda, and now you have this narrative, and everything reiterates that narrative. Everything reiterates this whole Christian paradigm perspective. Okay? And that's not to say it has nothing to do with morals. There's nothing wrong with having morals. We all need morals. That pretty much aligns with just having a soul. We know what is right and what is wrong. You're born with that conscience. Okay, so it's not the same thing. So for somebody to say they don't deal with religion doesn't mean they don't have morality. And just because a person deals with religion doesn't mean that they do have morality. So that's a very common misconception, right? So this is just simply talking about its spiritual column, symbolism. So, and it raises up. Once you get to the brain, that's how we get to the third eye. We get to the great awakening, the great eye, So, and it's referring to, yet again, your own brain. Okay, so it's just simply symbolizing the power that's within you and how to awaken said energy. Okay, so now that we've gotten all of that out of the way, right now, so let's take a look at the perception of Satan, or how we understand Satan to be. Okay, so what it actually is, because it's only simply a polarity, we're only simply talking about the opposite self. We're talking about the shadow self, the shadow side of self, the double self, right? So in Gnostic terms, or in occult terms, in ancient terms, is really referring to your soul. That's the true part of you, the dark within you, what makes you you, what brought you here. That great evil. And it's seen as evil because the Gnostics believe that everything physical was evil, because you fall into a lower nature, because you're no longer in spirit. So you taking a boundless, limitless spirit and you bound it to a physical body. Okay, so that's evil in itself. So the Gnostics saw the physical as evil. They saw human thought as evil, because it creates further of the physical. And it's a flawed world, So like we said, this is a dual reality. Where one exists, you automatically have to have an opposite. Okay? So when you're looking at it like that, right, the movie lays all of it out. Now let's look at the movie. Let's get into the movie. Okay, now let's see what they was talking about in the movie. It's pretty much the great evil is the monstrous soul. Okay, so like I said, the movie is definitely twisted. It's a twisted movie, because you don't expect the ending that you see. You don't expect it to play out the way that it does. But, that's the reason that it does, because it's really just all about this deeper concept of the Satan get behind me. If we were to make this a physical concept. Because remember, the best way to explain complex, higher spiritual concepts is with the story. It's always with the story, and it's the best way for the human mind to grasp anything is by stories, telling a story. Okay, so that's that. Okay, now in Western society, the devil is a representation of old gods that's been demoted to an evil spirit, embodying the traits of the Hellenistic period. Okay, so Christian leadership has always understood that they could command their flocks and keep control by instilling fear of the devil. So magic and witchcraft, those concepts meant that people did not need, or they no longer needed, the authority of the church. So that would equal to a loss of power for the church. So a lot of our films, horror movies, all throughout the 70s, 80s, really reiterated the devil concepts, fearing the devil, and the whole horror films, because they needed to continue to reiterate the fear, right? Because without the fear, you are limitless. See, that's what the first Bobby Hemmett video, that's what he was referring to when he said, well, if you can get over the devil thing. But a lot of people were triggered and they couldn't really get that message.
It's all in your fears. There's no such thing as no faith. And once you get over the devil thing, you understand what I'm saying? Your mind can be expanded. It's the, yea, do I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. Evil is only what you perceive it to be. The way that you look into the abyss is the way the abyss stares back at you. If you scared, then you're gonna meet something, it's gonna scare you.
You scared?
No, I ain't scared.
You act like you scared.
You're only looking at your own mind. They teach that on the movies. Freddy Krueger could not kill nobody unless he was scared. They say they act through your fears.
And what he was meaning is, if you can get over that, if you can get past that fear, that deeply, deeply, deeply embedded fear, then you can reach a whole new level of spiritual awareness and spiritual awakening. Because you will no longer have that fear to hold you back. Because remember, the only thing that can hold us back is fear. And fear can only exist in our own minds. So we have to be made to believe in the fear. Right? And so when we're programmed to think this way, to look at things this way, even if you're not a church going person, you will still have a natural reiterated fear of the devil, fear of hell, fear of evil. It's just a naturally embedded thing. And that's the reason why that's done, because as I stated before, those things that are labeled or attached to the occult or satanic deals with things of empowering the people. So let's take a look at this movie. Right now, let's see how this movie brings out this concept of the Satan get behind me. Okay, let's take this a little further and let's look at this. Right now, in the movie, so looking at the film, when you look at the movie, so it opens with the main character. Well, no, let me go back. It opens and it shows us, it's set back in a period. They're at a hospital. Obviously, they're dealing with something out of this world. Something that's extraordinary. Something they've never seen before. Okay, because they're talking about Gabriel, as we come to know him as, right? Emily and Gabriel. And she says Gabriel is becoming a problem. He's getting more and more aggressive. And then they come in, they tell her he's trying to get away. So, and he begins to speak to them. And he speaks to them psychically through like radio. And he talks to them, right? And then it closes and we see the doctor say it's time we cut out the cancer. Right? Cut out the cancer. So it goes on, shows us the movie. We get this character, Madison. She's a pregnant woman. She's married. She comes home from work. Her husband is abusive. He pushes her. She hits her head. She hits the back of her head, right, on the wall. Now, when she hit her head, that's when it woke up Gabriel. So I hope y'all seen this movie, because it's no way of talking about this without doing the spoilers. Okay. So by him doing that, that's what woke up that energy, because the movie tells us that Gabriel was an extreme version of a teratoma. And if you know what that is, that's like a tumor that grows and it gets eyes, sometimes nails, hair, teeth. It basically looks like it's trying to form as a being. It's coming from a cancer tumor. So this happened in the womb. He was a parasitic twin. So apparently her mother was raped at 15 and she was forced to carry the pregnancy to term. She was, she gave birth to the twins. They were conjoined. One was parasitic. So Gabriel was the parasitic teratoma twin that was eating or leeching off of Emily, who we further later come to know is Madison. Right? So how does that show us the whole, get behind me type thing, right? Well, when she woke up, her husband was dead. He was brutally murdered. And she was attacked, right? She was quote unquote attacked. And she loses her baby. And we meet her sister and we find out she's adopted. And that she's also lost 3. She's had 3 miscarriages in 2 years. So that's very stressful. It has to be, very, that's just a lot for anybody to endure. For her to look like she's maybe going to carry this baby to term, only for this everything to happen, and she loses the child still. But we learn later that there was a reason for that, and that's because Gabriel was preventing her from carrying her babies, because he was pretty much feeding off of the fetuses, because he's representing her subconscious, because subconsciously we control our reality. And remember, Gabriel was connected to her brain, so when they tried to cut out the tumor, they cut away as much of him as they could, and they pushed the remainder of him into the back of her skull. So they pushed him in, so this was the only place that he was left, which was still in her skull. Okay, so over time and everything, he was suppressed and all of that, but still connected to her brain. So still causing a lot of things to occur throughout her life, So, that was that, because it's crazy to think, because even when they ran the fingerprints and everything, it was like, well, the fingerprints are upside down, almost as if the person was on the ceiling. And that's because Gabriel was literally taking over the use of her body and using her body, literally turning her arms for his use. So it looked like a backwards body, which was wild and crazy and trippy once you actually see what's killing the people or how it looks, right? But it's crazy to think that all this was her own self, like it literally was coming from within her. Like, I mean, she's literally at war, having a conflict with herself. So that's like the most spiritualist concept ever, just put into a physical example, because that is the greatest enemy that we will face. It is our ego. It is that which is within us that creates everything on the outside of us. So it really only makes sense, but her life is being unhinged by this entity. And that's the same thing. Like, our life gets unhinged by our own subconscious, by the things that our subconscious conjure up, that comes out of our own mind, our very own creation. So, and she's oblivious to it at the time. So her being oblivious, she thinks that something is literally after her. So she thinks that this is something outside of her, just like we think there is something outside of us that is after us, when really it's coming from within us anyway. So that's why I say that this is a very, very deep movie. It is gory, it is twisted, but it's very, very deep. And it's like, so, and you gotta remember, she tells her sister, she's adopted. She was told her birth mother died. So she knows nothing about her origin. She don't know where she come from or anything. So that kind of sounds like a group of people, maybe not knowing where they come from, not knowing their origin or what have you, because what we're truly talking about, we talk about origin, is referencing soul. So everything about Gabriel, and it's wild that he's named Gabriel, but it actually isn't, if you really know, because Gnostic was not, it's like the opposite of Christianity. But Gabriel, everything about Gabriel was seen as demonic, so, and when I say that, I'm saying in reference to everything that he did, he utilized darkness, he utilized the hidden, he utilized psychic ability to communicate. That was how he could communicate. He had to communicate through frequency. So that's why he was able to, mess with the radio or mess with the TVs or flicker the lights. That's a typical supernatural sign, so, and it's because he represents the primal self. He represents the shadow self, that earliest form of that energy. So that's why I'm saying that it's quote unquote demonic. Now remember, I told you that we, because of the Christian perception, have a certain concept, the ideal of what demonic means. Now daemon actually goes back to an origin in the word meaning genius. But that's why it's horror, that's why it's killing, it's mutilation, because it's representing a primal energy, which is like can bring total and utter destruction. So it's simply just about a representation of the energy. And so when she starts to have the visions, she starts to nightmares, or waking nightmares, the visions of recalling the things that Gabriel did, that all those murders and everything. That when she starts to do that, that's the connection that he has with her brain, because it's all coming from out of her mind. So what's happening was he was taking over her mind, and she was seeing what was like regular life, thinking she's living life regularly, when he has taken her body and done his own doings, or whatever it is that he chooses to do. Right? So, and it was trippy, because even when she got the phone call, you gotta think about phone and reception, how the phone was flickering, because of how where he was coming from to communicating telepathically. And he says to her, "You'll always be Emily to me." She's like, "Why are you calling me Emily?" Huh? I was like, "You know who I am, even if they say I'm only in your head." So when he says that to her, and she says Gabriel, so she knows. And he knows that she knows. She just doesn't remember. He's like, it doesn't matter if they told you it was all in your head. You know who I am. You let them tell you or convince you that I wasn't real, that I was just a voice. When she knew that it wasn't, she's like, no, I know this. This isn't me. So her adoptive mother, showed her a video of her talking to what seemed to be like an imaginary person or imaginary entity, saying Gabriel. And later on, her sister even goes back to that original hospital that we see in the opening scene, and somehow, according to movie logic, everything is just left there. So she finds all the evidence of everything that is, and realizes that it's really just Madison, or Madison is Emily and Emily is Gabriel, and it's really all one. And so he was putting her in a mental prison, and that's pretty much the Gnostic paradigm, that you are in a mental prison by your own brain, because your brain is telling you what you see and what you function. That's why it's the medulla oblongata, because it's coming from your brain. That's the ego in itself. So it's creating logic and all other types of things, formulating it. So when we do things that we know that we do not want to do, but we feel like we have to do these things because it's a part of society, it's a part of what we have to do, we create mental prisons for ourselves. We become prisoners of certain ideas, certain perceptions, or wanting certain acceptance from different individuals or certain people. That mental prison created by the ego, stemming from fear or insecurity. But see, the soul knows, the soul doesn't experience that. The soul doesn't experience the fear. That's why there's the supernatural strength and the supernatural ability, because the soul doesn't hold back. Because the fear only exists in your mind, only exists here, which is only ego. So that's not real to the soul. So you can't hold up an illusion to the soul. The soul wants what the soul wants. Okay, so that's why that it's seen as an insurmountable thing to overcome, right? Because what you're really dealing with is, see, what we have to remember about Christianity is that it comes from other cultures and other spiritual systems, and they've taken these things and just placed all these things in the Satan box, because we have to make these things bad. Because remember, we're talking about crusaders, we're talking about conquering, we're talking about land, we're talking about war. So they conquer these people. You don't want these people to be able to reconnect with when they were a free people, with when they were not conquered. So you take that from them, you strip that. So it's a part of colonizing, right? So we can only see this from the Christian narrative unless you've done the due diligence to do the work to be able to see past it, to at least get back to what that stems from, so that you can understand deeper. So, it's pretty much a whole Gnostic concept in the whole movie of the Malignant, which stems from ancient Egyptian or Kemetic knowledge anyway, so and even seeing it and everything, when you see it, it looks totally supernatural, like it's walking backwards. Evil is lived backwards. Like it's on so many levels. And once she was able to wake up and take back control over her body, then she was able to place Gabriel in a mental prison like he did her. Then she was able to utilize all the strengths that he had, because she realized if he could do it, I can too. So that's the whole thing in the movie. So, just looking at it, I always tell people all the time, the truth is in the movies. That's where the truth is. It's in the movies. It's not on the news. Don't watch the news. That's your programming. That's what they want you to believe. That's everything that they're coming to feed you. That's like the tube in the Matrix. But the movies, that's where they leave the hints at. Now, sometimes they'll like to flip it on you. But if you got the eye to see, then you can see. And all of these, occult concepts are just pretty much pushing the same spiritual information. It's about alchemy. It's about spiritual rebirth, spiritual transcendence. It's about ascending to a higher nature of being. Now, I can't speak for everybody. Nobody can speak for everybody on anything. But, what people choose to do morally, you got to deal with people accordingly. But, that pretty much breaks down the Malignant. And I've took the liberty of putting my Cash App tag here. So if you guys find the content helpful at all, please donate to the Cash App. Feel free to visit the website and purchase the ebook, a copy of the ebook. We have the numerology book, A Guide to Inner Peace, and we have the book on alchemy, A Guide to Self-Mastery. You can also get the paperback or hardback copy or Kindle version on Amazon also. So all this is in my link. And if you have not subscribed to this channel, please do so and turn your notifications on so you can know when I go live or when I drop new content. But in the meantime, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up. And like I said, feel free to donate. I'm a family woman. I got a husband and kids, so it gets a little hard to be consistent with giving y'all the content, but I'm doing the best that I can. So this concludes this video. I appreciate you all for watching. Please like and share and drop a comment below if there's anything that you would like to add to the conversation in this whole concept that we have discussed today. Peace.